Hi there and welcome back. It must be Tuesday. It's been a lot of Tuesdays since we've talked, and hope you enjoyed your holidays as much as Kathy and I did with our new granddaughter. That was a great treat. Today we're going to talk about Aston Martin. Now, Aston Martin was not invented by David Brown, much to the chagrin of what a lot of people think. They think David Brown invented Aston Martin. They think Henry Ford invented the car. Neither of those are true. Let's go on with it. In 1913, Lionel Martin and Robert Bamford, who both enjoyed racing in hill climbs, automotive competition that was just getting started. Think about it, 1913. That was right at the beginning of the automobile. And they put together a car that had a Climax four-cylinder motor. And get this, they used a 1908 Isotta Fraschini chassis. Isotta Fraschini is a giant car usually, but they used an Isotta Fraschini chassis and this little simplex, Coventry simplex four-cylinder motor, and they made a car out of it. Well, they had a little bit of success with it apparently because they started manufacturing, or they were getting set up to start manufacturing automobiles shortly after their hill climb at, now this is the rest of it, where were they competing? Well, they were competing near Clinton, England, on a place called Aston Hill. That was the hill climb, Aston Hill, hence Aston Martin. Now you know. Anyway, they were getting ready to go into production and something else happened. It was called World War I. That put an end to it, their production anyway. And coming out of World War I, they started to get into production, but it wasn't very long before they ran out of money. They weren't being very successful at the business. And in 1924, Martin and Bamford and Aston Martin went into bankruptcy. Well, the company was picked up by Renwick and Bertelli and two or three other people with money, and they took over Aston Martin Motors. They did all right up until, guess what? World War II. So there goes the company again. Well, after World War II, it got rescued again. This time by a fella that had an inheritance of a tractor company. There's always been a bunch of jokes about tractor motors and Aston Martins. Believe me, that never happened. This fella's name was David Brown. Go figure. David Brown, hence DB. His first sports car, he loved sports cars, was the DB1. I think that was 1951 or 52, and it lasted until 53. And then he created the car that most of us that are fans of Aston Martin saw, which was the DB2. And that whole progeny of automobiles continued for quite some time, up until the 70s. Now in the 70s, 1972 specifically, David Brown sold out, and it was probably a wise decision at that point. He sold out to Ford Motor Company. Did you know that Ford owned Aston Martin? And Ford was the new regeneration of this wonderful, beautiful, historic sporting car. Well, they did quite well. It has gone into other ownerships since then, and they continue to manufacture cars. And I think the best move that was ever made by Aston Martin, the company, was when they signed on with Albert Broccoli to help him provide a star car for his movies about this fella named James Bond. And what was the car that Bond used? It was not a DB2. What was the very first Aston Martin in the Bond films? It was a DB5. And what was the film? That was Goldfinger. One of my favorites, but you gotta love them all. This Aston Martin, you've probably seen before. It's a 2008 DB8 Vantage, V8 of course, convertible. And we sold this a couple of years ago. It was purchased by Dan Britton. He's a friend of ours. He's a local entertainer. He owns Pierce Arrow Theater and great quartet. Wonderful, a lot of fun guys. And he's a car guy. He is an absolute gearhead. Well, as is with most entertainer gearheads, their tastes changed, their penchants for things automotive changed, and so now we've got this Aston Martin DB8 back, and we'll move it on again. But Dan really enjoyed this car. Dan Britton used to be in the Guinness Book of World Records for the world's lowest voice, whatever that is. Anyway, neat guy, took good care of his car, doesn't have many miles on it, 49,000 miles. Did you know who designed this car? Modern Aston Martin. It was Fisker. Fisker now manufactures, or has his name on, a new car called a Fisker. Fantastic automobile. He also created an electric car. It gets so intertwined. The manufacturers, the designers, the engineers, it's fun to follow the hierarchy of who decides what happens, and it's fun to follow the designers and the engineers and how they solve all of these problems that people want solved. Anyway, here it is, 2008 Aston Martin DB8 Vantage convertible, black on black, fun car. That's my history of Aston Martin for today. I hope you had a good time. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you again next week.